Hey everyone, you're tuned into InfoQuench with Jeff.
And Amy. Join us as we talk about anything.
And everything.
All the stuff that makes life interesting.
So let's get to it. Hey everybody, and welcome to InfoQuench. I'm your host, Jeff.
And I'm Amy.
And this podcast, we're going to be talking about storytelling.
Yeah, how to tell a good one.
How to tell a good one, which I'm not very good at.
Nor
I'm
am
not very
I.
good at stories.
No, and you know what? I remember people who are exceptionally good at telling stories. Yeah, I think we all have a few people in our circle that you're just like, when they have a story to tell, everybody sort of gathers around and they pay attention.
Yes, our friend Andres tells the best stories. Like, he has all the elements that we're going to talk about, I think, in this podcast, right?
Yeah, so we're just going to go through some of the tips. I read through a few different articles and just gathered up some tips on how to get better at telling stories. And
so first, you're going to start with how not to tell a story, correct?
yes.
Is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, well, and this is a story we told in another podcast, but I'll just sort of tell it in my regular Amy storytelling way.
Okay, go for it.
But I'll do an abridged version
Action.
for the essence of time. Gee, that was. I'm already starting out badly.
Well, that's...
I'm framing it up to be a bad story.
Well, yeah.
Once upon a time...
Given too much feedback and background... Anyway, go ahead.
Once upon a
Excuse
time,
me.
Jeff and Amy, that's us. We went on a kayak trip down a river, and it was really a long kayak excursion, like 2 hours.
Very foreboding.
And there was a storm, and
Yeah.
and then we finished up, and we got out safely.
Wow, that is a crappy story. There was no beginning. Well, there was a beginning and an end. That's
You know
about
what? One thing I'm really great at, honey, it's telling a bad story.
Yeah.
And
So-
a bad joke.
Let's talk about, then, how to tell a better story.
Well, that's right. And the difference between people who seem interesting and people who don't often is their ability to turn experiences into compelling stories.
That's
so they
right.
can make the mundane seem, interesting just by how they recount their experiences.
I have to say, just before we start, that there was this really fantastic skit on the Mr. Show show. Did we watch a lot of those? I think we might have back in the day, because I had them on disc or whatever. But anyways, there's this one where
What's
it's a
a
black
disc,
and
honey?
it's a black and white kind of like spoof on the adventurer that comes back from this long adventure and starts to tell a story. And his story starts like, and there I was in Africa, blah, 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 blah. And then he leans on the same shelf in every part of the story, and then everything falls off the shelf and it ruins his story. And I just love that. And then he's like, they do another take of it, and then he leans on the same shelf. I know you're not impressed, but if you watched it, it was really funny.
Is it the look on my face that
yeah.
says I'm not impressed?
Yeah.
No, this is one of the don'ts of storytelling.
Don't look at people in the face.
No, don't tell the story.
Yeah. Don't
Just
tell
kidding.
the
I'm just
story.
kidding. We're recording this on Father's Day, and I'm being
Oh, yeah.
really nasty.
I know. Some Father's Day. Jeez.
Happy Father's Day, honey.
Thank you very much. I love being a father.
You're an amazing one. All right. Back to the... I don't know. What were you even talking about there? Mr. Show?
Mr. Show, yeah.
If you want,
You have
to
to
check
watch
out
it.
Mr. Show, Google it. Don't try to
Yeah.
look it up on some fancy fandangled disc from the...
Yeah. That you
Past
downloaded
times.
a long time ago. And don't do that anymore.
So it's true some people do have like a natural storytelling ability, and they're just good at it from birth, I guess. Coming into the womb, telling the story of their birth.
Same with joke tellers.
That's right. But anybody can learn the craft of storytelling.
I need to learn it. Teach me.
According to the Harvard Business Review, in our information-saturated age, you won't be heard unless you're telling stories. So if you're just giving out facts and figures,
That is true.
and all the rational things that we think are important, those things won't stick in the mind of the listeners. It's stories that create sticky memories. And I'm using quotations here around the sticky memories.
It is true.
But really, by attaching emotions to things, it helps people create a memory and hold on to something. And that really made me think about the idea of fables. When you're
Yes.
trying to teach
Aesop's
morals
fables.
or lessons to children, you don't just say, sour grapes. You
Yeah.
tell the whole story about the...
You tell the whole story about the 45 people that had their heads cut off and, Like, that's serious. Remember reading Grimm's fairy tales?
Oh my God, that was a horrible
There was one
book.
you refused to read to him, and what one was it? We actually threw the book out. I think we didn't want anybody other kid to read
It
it.
was horrible. There was an image of
What was it?
This man had killed all his wives, and it had an image of them all hanging from the ceiling,
Yes,
like
that's
in a
right.
closet or something.
Whatever that was.
It was horrible.
Do you remember the story?
I know.
No?
I don't normally destroy books, but that particular, I don't remember what nursery rhyme it was, but it was horrific. And I don't normally destroy books, but this one I was like, I can't have another child come across this. It gave me nightmares.
It's the ancient version of Scared Straight. It really is.
I was like, this is going straight into the garbage.
Yeah, that's funny.
I may have recycled it, but
You left it
myself
as
a
a
little
nightmare for some other kid.
didn't burn it in the backyard, Fahrenheit 451 style or anything. But yeah, so definitely when you put a story around a lesson or any kind of information that you're trying to give, it definitely sticks better. And we're actually apparently programmed through evolutionary biology to be both consumers and creators of stories. So it definitely can be something that's, a learned
Well, if you think
thing.
of the barkers and stuff at old carnivals and stuff, when they try to they're trying to sell something to you and they tell you a story. Come and see the blah 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 blah, blah 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 blah. And if they were like, come and see, I can't tell the story very well, so don't come and see it. You know what I mean? It would just be
That's right. So if you want to be a barker at a carnival, is that
have
what they're
good
called?
stories.
Barkers?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. So, according to theartofcharm.com,
Art of Charm.
one of the key things, and I saw this in several articles, it's about injecting emotion into stories. That's what really sets a good story apart. So two people can tell the exact same story and have completely different results. And what makes the difference is the emotion that the storyteller puts into the narrative. Mm-hmm. So every story sort of has an emotional core. So, how the storyteller themselves feel about the events that they're describing. So when you're telling the story, you should be thinking about that, thinking about how you felt when this actually happened.
Right.
So what was motivating you, or what troubled you? How did you feel about your surroundings? How do you feel now about what happened then? And if you can sort of express that while you're telling the story, your listeners are more likely to hang on every word.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing that I was thinking about too when it comes to storytelling is that there's no need for unnecessary details.
Well, I'm going to probably cover some of that.
You are? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't know. Honestly,
That's okay.
I don't see.
This is
Can I bring it up and then we can just talk about it now?
Yes.
Because if you were saying something like,
Yes, you
okay,
may.
so there I was on my way to my grandmother's house. And it's, where Winslow Street and Charlotte meet, but there's that alleyway that you can walk down, and then
when people get into the tangents
those steps
of
that are
tangents.
broken and stuff, and you got to watch every third step so you don't fall on your face, and then all these unnecessary details ruin a story. And I've seen so many stories get ruined doing that, and I just did it just now. So
Well, and there are people who can go off on a tangent and bring it back around.
Yeah.
But then there are the people who never come back, and you feel like you've just been left hanging there, and that's a horrible feeling.
I guess every single detail in a story should be pertinent to the story itself. I think that's a safe bet. So you have to skip that one. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just, this is the fun thing about podcasting is that we sometimes just have to jump around a little bit.
We just have
to wing it a little bit. So back to the idea of around putting emotions into the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Structurally, you should find some opportunities to, where you can naturally put those feelings in. So, when you're basically, you might take a pause and just say, I couldn't believe it, or at this point I was feeling, excited
so
or
there I was,
terrified.
sweating like a...
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a quote that says, I don't know who said this, but, basically you have to be interested to be interesting. So you have to be interested in your own story.
Yeah.
If you're not interested, your listeners won't be. So you have to,
if you have a boring,
express that
monotonous
emotion.
approach to your story, it's not going to be interesting to somebody else.
Another important part about telling a story is just really knowing your narrative. So every story is really just a sequence of events, whether you're reading it or you're telling it, but it needs to be told in the right order. And extraneous information, like the details you talked, like, when you
Yeah.
go off on a tangent, just it slows the story down. So people are sort of left wondering, like, what's the ultimate point of the story,
Disinterested.
right?
That's what happens to me.
Yeah, they
I'm just
lose
kinda
interest. Like, okay, you're talking about broken stairs.
This
I
is
don't
all
even
of
know
a
what was
sudden
happening at the beginning.
a waste of time.
And so you need to really know what's essential about your story. What do you need to get across? So you got to think about, what the main event is. But remember that your story starts before the main event.
Right.
So, why were you in that situation to begin with? So what's some key information that your audience may need to appreciate the rest of the story? And that's really where the story begins. So you need to tee it up, give it
Yeah.
a little bit of background, context, and then start going into your sequence of,
That's right.
of
So
events.
with our canoe story, we'd be like, we just met. Were dating for like 2 weeks, and we decided
They were
to go on this
kayaks,
trip.
honey.
Yeah.
Were you even there?
What did I say?
Is this whole story a
Did
lie?
I say canoe? Did I say canoe?
Yes, I'm just
I meant kayaks. This whole story is a lie.
I'm getting you riled up so I can have a break to take a drink.
I'm a lie.
All right. I'm a lie. But yes. And you need to think about sort of the logical order of the, how you're going to tell your story. And that's really the framework of your narrative. And then you begin filling it in. So you think about who else is involved in your story. What does the listener need to know and understand about the other characters or the other people that are involved in your story? And really, fleshing out the other people can make your story more compelling, because it may be, maybe there are characteristics of the other people involved that the listener may relate to.
That's right.
And if they, can relate to those in the story, they have more of a vested interest in paying attention.
That's right. I was laid back in the kayak, and you were kind of really concerned about a lot of different things.
Yes.
With the weather.
So it goes with our life.
Yeah.
So most stories do follow a general pattern. You're starting with the background, how the story started. Then there's sort of some sort of event that triggers a story to begin. And, as with most good stories, you should have a little bit of a rise in the action till you get to that eventual climax or peak of excitement. And then,
Right.
you basically, you talk about the consequences of the story, or sort of the denouement. And
The
that's sort of
denouement.
the denouement,
Yeah.
as the French say.
the look back, like
Is that how it's denouement, right?
I don't know.
Sometimes I look at words and I
Yeah.
wonder whether I'm
Sounds
just
good to
making
me.
up new pronunciation. Because I look at them and I'm like, that's a French word, but maybe there's an English way to say it. Like hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
When you look at the French
Yeah.
version, like if hors d'oeuvre.
Hors d'oeuvre.
Hors d'oeuvre.
What was that word in the previous podcast?
Where am I? What's happening?
In the previous podcast that was French, do you remember? It was like
I can't
recall.
I can't say genre.
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 Yeah, you never say
Because-
genre. You never say genre. It's
That's
always
right. I can never
genre.
remember how to say it in
Yeah,
English
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
That's funny.
Because there's things about me that are
See, no, that's a good story
troubling,
about
and that
you.
is one of them.
That's a good story about you.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah, that kept people.
People just
very
they're
attentive.
they're downloading other podcasts.
Oh,
as we
they're
speak.
like, whoa! If there's any other stories just like this, I'm in.
Let me listen to episodes 1 through 69.
What a riveting thing! Are we on episode 69 right now?
I think we're on episode 70 now.
Whoa.
70.
70.
All right. So, above all, your narrative, your story needs to keep moving forward in some way, even when it takes a step back,
Yes.
which we've just done. It still needs to have that same sequence of events and, building tension. If the emotion is what draws the listener in, it's the narrative that keeps them wanting more.
Right.
So, you've got to structure it correctly so that, the listener will want to know what happens next. Just like watching a movie or reading a book, that same type of structure. Mm-hmm. And the whole reason that we're telling a story is it's not really about listening to ourselves talk. It's to create a connection
It's
between
conveying.
ourselves and our listener, right?
Yes.
It's sort of
It's communication with other people.
it's building
that-
rapport. It's how we develop relationships.
But it's supposed to be entertaining too. It's almost like while you're telling a story, you are like a 5 or 10 minute sitcom. And you just present yourself, and you're a character, and you go through all these trials and tribulations, and then it ends.
That's right.
Yeah, it's very interesting if you think about it. Edgar Allan Poe is, for me, one of the most amazing storytellers ever. I'm just going to say,
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to read great stories, check out some Edgar Allan Poe.
I honestly didn't even realize that he wrote a bunch of stories. I thought he was just a poet.
The Cask of Amontillado is an amazing story.
Okay.
Yeah. But, he...
Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Yes, there you go. There you go. But anyway,
Okay. Is it nevermore or evermore? Quoth the raven, nevermore.
Nevermore, I do believe.
Nevermore. Okay.
Or evermore.
I'll have to check that Simpsons episode
I don't know.
and see.
That's good. Yeah.
One of their Halloween specials covered it. But yeah, it's about building that connection with the listeners. So, and basically, the higher level of self-disclosure that you provide in the story, it's the deeper connection you're going to have with your listeners.
Absolutely.
So once again, a lot of this is from.
Where are you getting all this information?
Well, this one's it's a great website called artofcharm.com. So if you want to be charming. So I want to give credit where credit was due, because this is a really great article on storytelling. But there's 3 basic levels that they cover that you can to help you get a feel of what you're getting yourself into in terms of disclosure. So when you're thinking of levels of disclosure, there's light disclosure. And that involves amusing anecdotes about yourself and the world around you. It tends to be brief, clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. I went to the store and this funny, quirky thing happened, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Tends to be quick, little anecdote, but something funny or interesting that happens in the course of your everyday life.
Right.
Then there's a sort of a medium level of disclosure where things get a little bit more serious because it involves maybe your beliefs or opinions or ideas about the world. So you're revealing a little bit more about who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
It's a bit riskier because, there's someone out there that could be affected by that or disagree with that.
But I tend to like that idea.
The idea, well, I think so. I mean, medium disclosure is thought to be best after you've already established some sort of rapport with your listeners. Then you feel reasonably safe that even if they don't agree, they won't be looking for the nearest exit, is how they put it. But I mean, it kind of goes with, they give you the benefit of the doubt. Even if they don't agree with this, they understand, they know you well enough from other, involvement, like other stories or other experiences with your personality, that this is just, one story. It's not a reflection on everything. And if they don't agree with it, doesn't mean they don't like you as a person. So there's sort of that medium disclosure level. And then the riskiest is when you get into a heavy disclosure.
Right.
So this is where you start to share your fears and your insecurities, your failures. And, with heavy disclosure, you might come across as being needy or validation seeking. But, and your listeners might laugh at you rather than with you. Hopefully not so.
Some storytellers like it when people laugh at them.
Well, it's that's true. I mean, there are a lot of comedians that are
self-depreciating humor.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very common form of comedy.
There's a lot of comedy that is based around that. And actually, I would have to say that everybody enjoys it. I would like to think, anyways, everybody enjoys it when we can watch somebody make fun of themselves in a funny way. That's good storytelling. I enjoy that. The light disclosure piece makes me think of, if we're relating it to comedy, I would think of like Jerry Seinfeld. Right.
When he talks about, the funny things that happen in everyday life.
Yeah.
But he's not so much, disclosing any of his own personal vulnerabilities.
Absolutely not. He very rarely does.
He doesn't get into things that are controversial, and so it is relatively light. But I also think about the benefits of heavy disclosure. I mean, we're very much in the age of, people seeing strength and vulnerability and putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
So I think that I know I personally enjoy listening to podcasts where people do lay it out there on the line, and it's raw and it's real.
Me
and
too.
It's not just the surface stuff, the superficial stuff. So I think it's a risk, but then the reward is great. The greater the risk, the greater the reward.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that.
Somebody said that.
I like that idea. And you know what I think we should do is we should take all these tips, right? And then maybe in a future podcast, we should exercise all of these tips in a story. You tell a story,
I thought
and
we
I'll
could
tell a story.
actually end this
Oh, well-
podcast with perhaps
Oh, okay. Are we
trying
going
to retell that story from the beginning.
both of us or just one of us? Like,
Well,
are you gonna tell?
We can
part?
do rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, I think you should do it. Go ahead.
So, in terms of the levels of disclosure, for the most part, according to that particular article, where they talked about disclosure, is if you're out at a bar or at a business event where you're just networking and you're meeting people for the first time, that light level of disclosure is probably where you want to stay, like in the realm of maybe a little bit to medium self-disclosure once you started to make a connection. Oh,
if you didn't, it would be funniest
I know,
if you're
but there
watching
are
a
people
movie and someone just started saying the third part of the story, what's it called? So there's the light story, then there's the middle one, and then where's...
Oh, I mean, it's just like the level of disclosure. So for instance, it would be like you just meet somebody, and then all of a sudden they're telling you about, their childhood, issues.
So there I was. I just pooped my pants, and just on from there.
But heavy disclosure is probably, for the most part, if you want to play it safe, it's best to keep it with people that you know really, really well.
Yeah, you're right.
Who are trusted, or people that you want to build that relationship with. That's a way to really get a close connection with people. I know a lot of times when you're building new relationships or friendships, when you start to have those deeper conversations where you're really,
that's what undercover police
about
officers do when they're trying to infiltrate the mob. They do. They start light, and then hey, get a little bit more heavier stories. And
where do you get those little baggies you sell that weed in?
Oh yeah, that's Saturday Night Live.
That was a great
but
skit.
how much are they? And
how do you figure out the pricing model on
It
this?
was so funny. That was so funny.
All the little things you don't think about, the heavy decisions in illegal drug trafficking. I guess one of the main things around storytelling is just practicing the craft of storytelling.
Okay.
And they actually do give out in this article some ideas around how to do that. And you can actually spend some time doing the homework and list out some of the favorite stories you tell about yourself. Just
and then
title
embellish them.
Like we might title this one Kayak Story.
Yes.
But pick what it is and then list out what the important elements are of that story, like what jumps into your head when you think about it. Write them down in the order that makes sense.
I wonder if there's an optimal length for a story when you're telling it.
I didn't really see anything around that. I mean,
you don't want to go on for days.
I think when people start falling asleep, you've probably passed the the point of length. But I think anything that's too short doesn't allow you to build in that emotional component and to actually build suspense.
And that's what we're all going for.
So yes. Just getting back to the idea of practicing, write down the elements of the story, and then ask yourself, how did you get into the situation? What's the backstory around it? What's the framework? And then everything else, you just kind of fill in the meat around the bones.
Right.
And just practice telling the story without looking at the notes that you've written down. You could even try practicing it with a loved one if they have a lot of patience to listen to the same story.
Or in a mirror.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when you practice speeches or anything like that.
It really is.
But if you do have some key stories that you tell often, and if you're somebody who's networking a lot, meeting a lot of new people, it may be helpful to spend the time like you would practice a speech. And
it makes you way more likable.
You don't want to do it to the point that it becomes robotic and almost like you are reading from a script. But
you don't want to be that guy in the room where it's like, oh man, he's going to tell a story, isn't he? I don't want to hear any more of his stories. They're so boring. And that's usually me.
Well,
no, saying that, not telling the story. I say that about, get out of here. You tell crappy stories. Get out of here.
I know, you're really hard to get along with.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So mean
another
to people.
sidebar.
But we talked about stories being a lot like jokes or comedy, and really they're it's trying them out, trying them in different ways, see what works, pay attention to your audience, like really look for those visual cues of whether do they seem interested, where did you lose them if they did lose interest. pay attention to the tone of your voice. You know, that'll help people respond. Obviously, if you're monotonous in your tone, then people are more likely to tune out, and they won't even know when you're reaching the climax of the story because it literally all sounds the same.
It's funny that you say that, because a lot of the comedians that we really like, case in point, Jim Gaffigan, when he's just telling stories, but he does it from the different perspectives. He's not just saying, oh, and then they said this. He actually changes where he stands and is that person, and then he goes back and is the person that person is talking to. Like
right.
It's like theater, really. So if you can make your stories more like a theater, like, you know, like a play, like an actor.
Well, and he's like well rehearsed, right?
Yeah.
I think the people who do it the best are the people who make it seem as though it's off the cuff, but you know that he's rehearsed that same story to make it seem natural.
That's truly what he does. He just tells stories about his life, but they're funny, and then he really polishes it off with how he presents it, which is all the attributes of a good storyteller, I would say.
So just to recap some of the main principles around storytelling, some of the don'ts would be, don't assume that you're not a good storyteller, because we all have it in us to become good storytellers. You just have to practice.
Even you, listener.
Even you. Even me, speaker.
So,
and then another don't would be, don't give yourself the starring role. It's important to talk about the other people in the story. Otherwise, it's just a Trump story.
That's right.
You don't want to come across as a narcissist.
Right.
And don't overwhelm your story with the unnecessary details, which you talked about, going off on tangents and things that really just don't contribute to anything with
don't do
the overall narrative. As far as the do's, consider your audience. So
always think of them.
Yeah, think about what's going to work best with them.
Do it.
Another do is to find inspiration from your own life experiences. Those are those true stories are the best stories to tell.
Yeah.
And then finally is to just pay attention to the great storytellers around you.
Like Edgar Allan Poe. Oh, well, he's not really. Well, I mean, you could have his book.
No, but even we all
Andre.
We start out
our
talking.
buddy Andre.
Yeah, Andre's a great storyteller.
He tells stories that will have people in stitches. Like he's a really funny, entertaining storyteller, I would say. He always has been. And
we all have Andres in our life, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
So pay attention when your friends that are the good storytellers. Just pay attention. Listen to the story too, but pay attention to what they're doing and what draws you in and what. And then also helpful is always paying attention to the ones that aren't the great storytellers and try to figure out what.
Talk to them afterwards and tell them about all their mistakes. When you're telling that story. Yeah, we didn't need the details about the
let's
stairs.
do a little debrief on our casual conversation we just had, and how you lost me at the stairwell.
Yeah.
So, Jeff and I were.
What?
We had just started dating after meeting online, and we decided that we were going to take a little kayaking trip.
Yeah, in Maine.
In Maine.
I'll be that guy who just who just interjects with just like a couple words during your story. Keep going.
Yeah, you're really helping with the flow.
You're really doing great.
Great story.
Okay, so there we were.
I know, and we were both probably pretty nervous because it was our, we were just still getting to know each other, and neither of us, I think, were strong kayakers at all.
No.
And we found this little excursion, a little group. I think I just Googled it online. And I saw it was really cheap price. I'm like,
it was cool.
Let's go for it.
It's close to where we were staying.
Yeah, so we drove up the road, and the guy said, "You know what? It's not instructor led. You're just going to hop in these kayaks. There's actually nobody else in the group, and
you're the only ones."
Yeah, and the guy was just typical like, he did not seem like a kayaker. He just seemed like a guy who had some kayaks.
And
I decided to post a website online, and
that's right. And I remember the sky was nice and blue, and it was sunny when we got into the kayak.
Yeah, I was really excited.
It was a really beautiful day when we were just like getting to know one another.
I thought we were also going to get to know some other people.
Yeah, me too.
Then it was just us. But then I thought, it'll be great. We'll get to know one another.
So we get into the kayak.
Yeah, and I
start paddling
away.
Let
me know that you couldn't really swim.
Yeah, that's the first thing I said as we did our first paddle. I was like, I can't swim, by the way.
And I get that first little
tinge of
that little in the pit of your stomach that says something ominous is about to happen. And I remember the clouds kind of coming in.
Like we had been kayaking for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden the storm started to brew.
And then I started to like just recap all these Reader Digest stories that I've read
Yeah,
about lightning
and we thought we were
hitting
going to
people
be-
and on the water. And then we got near the end of our podcast and ran out of time. So
Thanks for listening, everybody. No, it doesn't go anywhere. We found the little spot we were supposed to go. We got out of the kayak and everything was fine, but we were kind of freaked out.
yeah, we both lived to tell the story.
And now we're telling it again.
And we actually told it in tandem. Like,
We did,
That
yeah.
was,
Tag team storytelling. That's for another podcast.
that's next level storytelling, people.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
And remember, you can catch up on past episodes at infoquench.com.
Or just about anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And help spread the word about InfoQuench.
Till next time.